Shalom, dear friends, and a very warm welcome to our Israel Vision studios in the beautiful Mount Zion Hotel. Our interview segment is called People Who Make a Difference. And our guest today, Michael Freund, is certainly making a huge difference here in Israel and around the world. He's the founder and chairman of Shavei Israel, and he writes a syndicated column and feature stories for the Jerusalem Post, Israel's leading English language daily. And he previously served as a deputy director of communications and policy planning in the Prime Minister's office under Benjamin Netanyahu. He's a native of New York, and he holds an MBA in finance from Columbia University and a BA from Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University. It's a real joy to have Michael Freund with us today. Thanks for being here, Michael.
Thanks, it's my pleasure. It's good to be here with both of you.
I have a question.
Sure.
What is Shavei Israel?
Shavei Israel is Hebrew for those who return to Israel. Our goal is to reach out to lost Jews around the world, to help them to reconnect with their heritage and to bring them home to Zion. The prophets, as we know, foretold that at the end of days there would be an ingathering of the exiles, that God would bring back his people from the four corners of the earth. And we are witnessing the fulfillment of those prophecies before our very eyes. We are seeing a real awakening among descendants of Jews around the world who want to come home again. And so we are doing what we can to facilitate that process.
That's exciting.
Now, Michael, are these the lost tribes of Israel? We talk about the 10 lost tribes, or where do you find these people?
Well, we know from history that about 2,700 years ago, the Assyrian Empire invaded the land of Israel and captured the northern kingdom. And in doing so, as the Book of Kings tells us, the 10 tribes were sent into exile. To put this in perspective, it was a national calamity of enormous proportions.
Yes.
10 out of the 12 tribes, meaning 75, 80% of the people of Israel, in one fell swoop, were swept away. But the prophets, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, and others, from the very beginning, have promised us that those tribes would return, that those people whose ancestors stood at Mount Sinai and received the Torah, the Word of God, that they would not be lost forever, which means that they are out there. And in recent years, we've been blessed enough to have located the descendants of one of these tribes.
Which was that?
They're called the Bnei Menashe, the children of Manasseh, Manasseh being one of the 10 tribes. The Bnei Menashe currently live in northeastern India, in 2 states there called Mizoram and Manipur. In recent years, we've brought back about 800 of these people to Israel, where they now live as Jews and Israelis in every respect. There are another 6,000 to 7,000 of them still in India. Just a few months ago, Israel's Sephardic chief rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Amar, formally recognized the Bnei Menashe as descendants of Israel and has agreed to facilitate their return to the Jewish people. So in the coming months, I will be traveling once again to India, and we will jumpstart this process. And God willing, by the end of this decade, by the year 2010, we will see all the remaining members of the tribe of Manasseh back home here in Zion.
Now,
wow, that's awesome.
How do they differ from the Indian people around them who are Hindu or Buddhist or Jain or some other form of Hinduism? How are these people differentiated?
Well, it's a fascinating story. They, throughout the centuries, despite their wanderings in exile, they managed to preserve a range of Jewish customs
Such
and
as?
practices. They continued to observe the Sabbath on Saturdays when Jews celebrate it. They performed circumcision on the 8th day. They followed various dietary restrictions, laws of keeping kosher. Most interestingly, up until about a century ago, they continued to perform various sacrifices as they are delineated in the Bible. The Passover sacrifice, various sacrifices for the festivals around the year. And they always held on to this strong and deep tradition that they were from Manasseh. That, for example, we heard from many people there an old tradition that whenever a natural disaster would strike, a tornado or a flood, the men of the village would emerge from their homes and throw their hands up towards heaven, and they would declare in their language, the children of Manasseh still live. The children of Manasseh still live, as if they were trying to appease the heavens and declare that they had not forgotten where they had come from.
Now, to me, it's very interesting that on every Sabbath table, when the father blesses his children, this is all over the world, in every Jewish home, the father says the traditional blessing, but he ends it with saying, "May the Lord make you like Ephraim and Manasseh," meaning that Manasseh was chosen out kind of to say that even among the heathen, Manasseh would continue to serve the God of Israel. Do you think that's connected in all?
I very much think so, because that blessing was specific regarding Manasseh and Ephraim, as you mentioned, because Manasseh and Ephraim were born and grew up in Egypt, where their father Joseph was serving as the prefect to Pharaoh. They were, in a sense, the first Jewish children to grow up in exile in a foreign land. And nonetheless, they managed to retain their tradition and heritage and their Jewish identity. So in that sense, they were intended to serve as a model throughout the generations, throughout the centuries, for all Jews to look back and to see that even though they faced that challenge of being a Jew in a foreign land, they nonetheless were able to remain loyal to their ancestral beliefs.
Now, what about other parts of the world? What about in Portugal, the B'nai Anusim? Can you tell us about them? What's happening there?
Sure. As we know, about 5 centuries ago, at the time of the Spanish Inquisition, many of the Jews of Spain and Portugal were compelled to convert to Catholicism by the monarchy there. Nonetheless, many of these people continued over the centuries to covertly practice their Judaism. In other words, in public, they professed Catholicism, but in private, they continued to keep the flame of Judaism very much alive in their hearts and in their beliefs. And despite the persecution, despite the risks that they faced, it's something that they passed on successfully down the generations. And we are now seeing an unbelievable phenomenon where more and more of the B'nai Anusim, whom historians refer to as Marranos,
which is a derogatory term.
Yes.
Anus means to be hidden, right?
Anus means to be coerced into doing something against one's will. And more and more of these people now have begun to come out of the closet, as it were. They're feeling more free to identify with their Jewish heritage, to grapple with their rather complicated identity.
My goodness.
And thank God, more and more of them are coming back to their roots and coming back to their people. And we have sent a team of rabbis and teachers to Spain and Portugal and Brazil to facilitate this process and to serve as a local resource for these people to enable them to come back.
right here in our own neighborhood, we have Palestinian friends who say that they were converted to Islam, but that they were Jews here for generations, and they owned such large tracts of land. And even the generation of just 20 years ago, one of the sons had a nervous breakdown because he so wanted to be Israeli. Can you believe that? And even there are some traditions that have held, such as having the Hanukkah.
Wow.
And that's right among us here, among the Palestinians.
It's really, Michael, this
amazing, yes?
is really, sorry, you finished?
Yes.
It's awesome. The work you're doing is so holy. It's a holy work. It's like, finally, it's like a preparation for the Messiah. Do you feel that?
I very much feel blessed that God has directed me to engage in this work. On a personal level, of course, it provides a tremendous amount of satisfaction to enable these people to fulfill their dreams of rejoining the Jewish people.
Yes.
And but even on a theological level too, I think it has deep meaning. Israel, of course, is going through some very difficult times right now, where our enemies around us continue to seek our destruction. Our own government, unfortunately, plans to turn over parts of the land of Israel to our enemies. And it's very easy in these circumstances to fall into a sense of despair. But when we stop and consider the fact that God is fulfilling his promises to us, that he is gathering these people in who have been lost to us for so many centuries. When we see, for example, the prophecy of Jeremiah coming true, that Rachel, the matriarch Rachel, would weep and plead to God and say, "Where are my children?"
Yes.
And God would comfort her and say, your tears have not been in vain, because your children will return. And that is happening before us, literally from places such as India and China and Brazil and Spain and Portugal. This is a worldwide phenomenon. Yeah. And I don't think one can explain it in rational terms. I think it is clear and compelling evidence that the God of Israel is living up to his word, is living up to the promises that he made to his people Israel, that they shall never be abandoned.
He says in Isaiah chapter 42, "I will say to the north country, give them up, to the south, keep them not back, bring my sons and daughters from the ends of the earth." And it's like God's voice is going out among the nations, and the Jewish people, those who are culturally, ethnically, genetically connected, are hearing that voice. It's like God's voice is calling them back home.
Yes, it most certainly is, because again, I just cannot fathom of another way of understanding this phenomenon, given its historic implications, its theological significance. It simply defies rational understanding.
It does.
And I would, if I may, I would ask your viewers out there to pray that this process should continue to unfold. Because as you can imagine, in work of this sort, the obstacles we face, simply on a bureaucratic level alone,
I can't imagine.
it's enough to drive a person over
crazy.
the edge.
Yes.
So we certainly need all those prayers that we can get,
Yes.
that this process should continue, that the Jewish people should continue to awaken to their historic mission to come back and to come home.
And with that, we want to thank Michael for this incredible insight into the ingathering into Israel. And the thing it says to me is that prayer is eternal. The prayers that Rachel cried on her deathbed we're seeing answered to this day. And so that is the end of our interview section for now, and we want to bless you and thank you for praying, as Michael has asked you to do. You can be in touch for more information by visiting our website, and we close by saying, Shalom,
Shalom, shalom.
from Jerusalem.
Shalom, this is Dr. Jay Rawlings reporting to you for Fact or Fantasy. The fantasy this week I want to discuss is the myth that Israel is illegally and without justification destroying Palestinian homes in the Gaza Strip. The fact of the matter is that the Palestinian Authority has repeatedly made commitments to stop terror against Israel, but has never followed through on any of them. In the most recent agreement, the roadmap, the Palestinian Authority agreed to declare an equivocal end to violence, terrorism, and to undertake visible efforts on the ground to arrest, disrupt, and restrain individuals and groups conducting and planning violent terror attacks on Israelis anywhere. PA President Mahmoud Abbas ratified this in his meeting with Ariel Sharon, the Israeli Prime Minister, in Sharm el-Sheikh under the watchful eyes of U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. And after some weak attempts, none of this has been fulfilled in the months following. It's important to remember that the late Yasser Arafat, before his demise, called on Palestinians to, quote, find what strength you have to terrorize your enemy and the enemy of God, end of quote. Of course, he was referring to Israel. In Gaza, the terrorists have acted with impunity since the PA was created. They intentionally hide in refugee camps and among the civilian population, knowing that Israelis will do everything they can to avoid attacking them out of concern for civilian lives. The civilian population puts itself at risk, however, by allowing the terrorists to use themselves as shields. When it comes to homes that Israeli security forces have demolished, they are not chosen at random. These are dwellings that are being used by terrorists as hideouts, bomb factories, and sniper or ambush sites. Buildings that are near the Egyptian border are used by terrorists to conceal tunnels that allow them to smuggle arms, explosives, and other terrorists into Gaza for the express purpose of killing Israelis and launching rocket attacks on nearby Israeli settlements. The government of Egypt, which could stop the smuggling and provocation immediately, refuses to do so. As in the case of fighting terrorism generally, the question that must be asked about Israel's decision to demolish homes is, what alternative is open to Israel? If the Palestinian Authority was doing its job and fulfilling its promises, the terrorists would be in jail, the bomb factories would be closed, and the tunnels filled in. But since they are not, Israel must find a way to protect its citizens, and security forces have concluded that demolitions are the most effective tool. Innocent lives have regrettably been lost, as the United States has discovered in fighting an urban war against anti-American insurgents in Iraq. It's virtually impossible to engage gunmen in populated areas and avoid civilian casualties. And like the U.S. Army in Iraq, the Israeli forces are defending themselves and seeking to minimize collateral damage. In the course of Israeli operations, it is tragic that civilians sometimes suffer. But rather than blame Israel, the Palestinians should demand the democratic election of new leaders who will dismantle the terror networks so that Israel has no need to take defensive measures. This is Dr. Jay Rawlings reporting to you for Fact or Fantasy from Jerusalem.
Welcome to His Still Small Voice. I'm Maridale Rawlings, and today we're in a garden in the hills of Benjamin, just outside of the city of Jerusalem. Welcome. Let's talk about inheritance. Oh, how important it is when someone dies for the children to be given a fair inheritance. You could receive a wonderful inheritance from your parents, or you can receive nothing. Sometimes in families there's such division and separation and hard feelings as a result of the inheritance. And this thing goes on and filters down into the children and into the children's children, and it can be a great blessing or it can be a bitterness. I'm sitting in a garden today as a result of an inheritance. And I'm so grateful for my father and my parents-in-law that helped provide this great inheritance for us as a family. We think in the scriptures of some stories of people who had a very bitter inheritance. One was Esau. He went to his father after Jacob had received the blessing, and he cried. He wept bitterly and he said, "Oh, my father, have you only one inheritance?" He was heartbroken. He felt rejected and cast out. He felt that he had lost everything. We know that story, don't we? It falls deep into the human heart. And if you'll turn over in Genesis just to another chapter, you'll read that women, Rachel and Leah, also said to Jacob, "Is there no inheritance for us in our father's house?" And that's when they left and came back to the land of Israel to make it their home. This issue of inheritance runs very deep. But I want to tell you something so sweet. The other night here in Jerusalem, we were watching Israel Vision, our television program, on TV, on local TV. And our little grandson, Amitai, was sitting with Grandma and Grandpa, and he was watching the TV, and he saw the still small voice come on, and he got so excited. He said, "Oh, this is my house." We said, "Yes, Amitai, this is your house." "Oh," he said, "that's great." 4 years old. The little boy already knows what is his inheritance. It's not just a physical house. It's that sense of belonging, that if it's Grandma and Grandpa's, hey, it includes me. And you see, that's the heart of the Father for you. If He gave it in the Scriptures, it's for you to take. It's there for the taking. It's like a treasure trove. It's like that chest, that mysterious, glorious pirate chest full of gold that you always wanted to find as a kid. Well, that's the Word of God. And in there, if you'll dig, you'll pull out gold, friends, pure gold, for your life, for your spouse, for your children, for your grandchildren, and for eternity. If you have any questions, meet me online, hisstillsmallvoice.com.